Welcome back, everyone, to the GOATcast podcast. I am CW, and today I finish up my series on the eras from the past 40 years by ranking them. If you haven't seen the two prior videos, I discussed the 1980s and 1990s, and then the 2000s and 2010s, grading them on the champions from that decade, the parity in the league during that time, and the prime players that made their mark during those years. So if you want to hear the complete breakdown of those eras, please check out those videos, as the playlist link will be in the description of this video. But today I will rank them from my least favorite era to my favorite, mostly going by my grades, but also going off my personal opinions on how exciting those years were and how much interest I had in the league during those years. Won't hold you guys long, so let's rank the eras from 1980 through the 2010s. But before I jump into those rankings, please like and subscribe to the channel. I'm working harder and harder to try to improve things, so with your help and engagement, it will help us to keep growing and improving the content. Thank you guys. Here are the rankings. Number 4, the 2000s. Even if I don't go by my scoring, just go to those videos to see my final score for the decade. This would likely still be my least favorite decade of the last 40 years. It's hard for me to say that too, as those years were some of the prime ones for some of my favorite players like Tim Duncan and Shaq. However, these years were an extension of the 90s and a transition into the higher paced 2010s. The league was looking for that next big megastar, and while they would definitely get it with LeBron James, those Cavs teams took a little while to get into a place to be contenders. In many ways, it was a very fun decade. Western wars between the Lakers and Spurs early in the decade, LeBron coming in and living up to the hype. International stars like Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Dirk Nowitzki, and Yao Ming becoming stars, and the first talked about super team with those 2008 Boston Celtics made it special. It just was weaker than the other 3 decades, in my opinion. Number 3. There were more moments where I wanted to flip this era with the 2000s and have it be fourth, but I think this decade was such a roller coaster and was extremely interesting as it pertains to current basketball. Like all beginnings of decades, it was an extension from the 2000s with teams like the super team Celtics, Lakers, and Spurs still atop of the heap. But then you had those Derrick Rose Bulls making waves, Paul George's Pacers, OKC Thunder with 3 first ballot Hall of Famers in KD, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. And then when we got that heel turn by LeBron, pro wrestling term for turning against the fans, taking his talents to South Beach, it upped the must-watch factor for many, whether you were pro-Heat or anti-LeBron. It was a truly exciting time, and then we got the game changer in Stephen Curry and those Golden State Warriors who steamrolled the second half of the decade but made LeBron an underdog story in those years, shifting many of his haters to side with him as he attempted to stand up to a giant, David and Goliath style. In the end, we got prime LeBron through those years. Steph Curry changed the way the game is played, as almost any court you go to, everyone is jacking up threes from all over the court. A great new generation of talent like KD, Westbrook, Harden, Kawhi, Paul George, CP3, AD, and Giannis rising into their primes. Just thinking about it, yeah, the 2010s were some good times. Now, I know if you're a fan of the channel, you're going to say I'm biased because the remaining decades were pretty much neck and neck when I graded them. However, I'll admit it, I'm slightly biased. So at number 2 are those crazy 80s. You can disagree with me because I know there's some younger fans that think the 80s were a bunch of plumbers and construction workers playing against a few superstars. But if you watched it back then, those games were high-scoring affairs, hard-hitting, and exciting. The Showtime Lakers can be described as an even flashier version of the Steph Warriors. They just had talent everywhere on the court and made teams look like amateurs when Magic Johnson would do his thing as the floor general. Then you had the Larry Bird Celtics that were just as talented, a little less flashy, but were just a well-oiled machine. And Larry Bird was doing a lot of the things we praised Nikola Jokic for doing with his passing ability, floor vision, and ability to scorch defenders almost anywhere from the 3 to mid-range. The Bad Boy Pistons became must-watch because unless you were from Detroit, you literally couldn't stand guys like Bill Laimbeer and Rick Mahorn basically tackling your favorite players. Of course, this was a decade where young Michael Jordan wowed fans and really brought in a huge set of eyes to the game with just how dominant he could be. Of course, slower than what we see today, the games and the players just showed a fundamental skill level you don't always see today due to how fast-paced games are. Not to mention such great names as Moses Malone, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Alex English, young Charles Barkley, Dominique Wilkins, and Hakeem Olajuwon making their marks. The 80s had some great basketball and drama-filled series that you had to be there to really enjoy. And of course, number 1, the 90s. All biases aside, this decade felt like the one that really catapulted the NBA into the stratosphere. More and more media crossovers, players in movies and television. I think once Jordan and those Bulls got to the mountaintop, it just made the game soar to new heights. I mean, it had to be a lucrative time for the association, with trading cards, video games, jerseys, all being major movers. While there will be many that complain that the decade was marred a little bit by the Bulls being so dominant and the fact that there were multiple expansion teams just really getting going in those days. So some of the teams were weak and had to work through the draft, and some teams were depleted with the talent having to be spread throughout. We still got some classic battles between those Bulls and the Ewing Knicks, Reggie Miller's Pacers, and later the Magic with Shaq and Penny, Hakeem and those Rockets being beasts, the Malone and Stockton duo in Utah, Shawn Kemp being a big problem in the paint, the 1992 Dream Team being an iconic moment in itself, teaming guys like Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and the other stars in a, no pun intended, dream combination. We even saw NBA players in pro wrestling rings. Barkley in his prime, Shaq showing how dominant a big really could be, the wild tactics of Dennis Rodman. It was just as much entertainment as it was sport, and I was glued for each marquee game. So there you have it, my rankings of the eras of the last 40 years. Do you all agree or disagree? How would you rank those decades yourself? Let me know in the comments section. Also, if you want to ascend to GOAT status like number 23, please hit that like and subscribe button and help the channel out. Hope you all enjoy this content, and we will be back soon with more. Thank you.